You know there is much more to life than sky and endless plains. Your father told you stories of the war, of Singapore and Paris, and how you long to go. But you are young and stuck out on the dry land. Chapter 12. But you are young and stuck out on the dry land. Sefton, the Price family's farm, was situated on a treeless plain at Taluna Bore, west of the Newell Highway between Moree and Gundawindi. The rich chocolate soil was lush and too deep for large trees to get a good hold. Apart from a few Athol tamarisk trees planted near the back door, the homestead could have not been more vulnerable to wind and dust. In the winter, it would have been icy as well. I wrote Little Girl from the Dryland about Mary Kay. She was allergic to horses and not impressed with the bush she was born to. Add to this an alcoholic father and a very strict Catholic mother, and she began to hate the bush. She told me how she often tried to stop George from building into her older brothers. She remembered sitting in the car many times outside the Boggabilla pub while George brought out a shandy for her mother, Joan. George did join Alcoholics Anonymous, but we don't believe he ever really stopped drinking. He mellowed, though, and he was one of the most charming men off the grog, if he was off the grog. George was always stirring me by saying, "Do you want to see me, dear boy?" The day I answered, "Well, yes, I do, George," he had no comeback at all. I left him a bit speechless when I asked him for Mary Kay's hand in marriage. By this time, I'd been to Melbourne, won New Faces, recorded Old Man Emu, moved to Sydney and bought a terrace house in Emma Street, Leichhardt. We were married back at Sefton in 1973. The homestead was spruced up for the day and it was a grand occasion. By then I was comparing the television show Travelling Out West, so the television cameras were there to film us in our wedding gear. I'll admit I was a bit of a wanker back then. I bought a white suit and wore a red bow tie. But don't forget, it was the 70s, a god-awful period for clothes, long hair, flares and all that stuff. Mary Kay, however, looked beautiful. Our honeymoon at Nelson Bay was a little unromantic. Mary Kay had morning sickness. I had no idea she was pregnant. By the time we moved into the Leichhardt home, our first baby was on the way. The little 2-story semi in Emma Street was full of charm, and we had great fun doing it up. It cost me $19,000, and I borrowed $13,000 of that. Paying $12 a week rent at Coogee didn't make sense to me when it wasn't that much more to take out a loan. I saved a bit of my cash to knock out a wall. The damp in one wall was so bad I had the neighbour, who was a brickie, build a false sandstock brick wall inside it. There was no damp course and the bricks were easily available and cheap from demolition sites, because the Italians were completely destroying the old houses in the inner city during that period. You just had to be prepared to knock off the lime mortar yourself. They were never meant to be a face brick, but everyone went crazy for them. Some of them had convict symbols like a heart or star impressed into them. They were made of bad quality clay, which created burnt splotches that had really great character. You needed to seal them. The outside front of the house downstairs was sandstone that I chipped back. The inside walls were just rubble held together by plaster. Back then, I guess, there were very few building regulations, or if they existed, I didn't know about them. Had I not been so hell-bent on being a songwriter and entertainer, I could have made a very good living out of buying, renovating and selling the old houses. There was no capital gains tax if you kept a house for 3 years. It was easy money. Our daughter, Amy, arrived when I was on stage at Seven Hills RSL Club. The club manager jumped up and announced it to my audience. Amy Catherine Williamson measured 21 inches long. I remember that because it was another 21 in my life. Both her grandfathers were born in 1921. I thought about buying a lottery ticket that week, but didn't. Later on, the address at our second home in Epping was number 3, 2 and 1, and the Epping postcode is 2121. And guess what? My city apartment today is number 21. No, I didn't buy it because of the number. I'm not into numerology, but I do enjoy coincidences. I can hear you wondering why I wasn't at the hospital for Amy's birth. I don't think fathers were encouraged to be at the birth back in 1973. I suppose also that I couldn't afford to cancel a gig. Club agents were pretty tough in those days, and had I cancelled, I might not have worked for that agent or club again. Our second daughter, Georgie, was born only 13 months later, and I decided to be at her birth, but I don't know that my presence helped Mary Kay through it. At one stage, she told me to fuck off when I offered her the gas. Georgie's was a 14-hour labour, so I could understand her mother's frustration. Amazing experience watching a baby arrive. Boy, I'm glad I'm a man. I'll never understand why such a beautiful occasion has to be so painful. I'm prepared to admit that I wasn't the perfect New Age father. At the time, a father's main job was to bring home the bacon. In my line of work, it took a lot of determination, but I certainly did that. Mary Kay, Amy and Georgia are all very comfortable in their own homes now, with plenty of yard for 3 grandchildren, and that's something I'm proud of. I never accepted a job over Christmas, so our family holidays were always special. Because both our families were on the land between Moree and Gundawindi, most years we went up there and enjoyed all the activities the bush can provide. We would spend some nights camping on the McIntyre River. How good was that? We didn't catch many fish, but that wasn't important. Camping, swimming, yabbying, hogging, playing euchre and 500, and of course sausages and cold beer. I was happy wandering around the bush, always in the knowledge that the Mai All Blacks, who were an important part of local and national history, had camped there. One year, the girls invited one of their school friends to come up there on holiday with us. She obviously didn't know much about camping. She quietly asked one of us what she should do to go to the toilet. She was told, just take a shovel and walk out of sight behind a tree. 20 minutes later, she arrived with poo on the shovel and asked, "What do I do with it now?" Some Christmas days were 40 degrees in the shade out at Adavale, the property of Mary Kay's oldest brother. I remember observing how slowly everyone was moving around, a natural reaction to such heat. That way, you don't really notice how hot it is. It's a dry heat out there. My folks on Baxpear had a pool, and so did one of Mary Kay's brothers. That made the heat more bearable. All in all, you couldn't have asked for a more enjoyable Christmas for all the kids.